Welcome to Movies That Matter, the podcast about recent films going beyond basic film criticism to boldly explore a social issue affecting people's lives. I'm Nicole Finari, and with me today are...
Stacy Moore.
And Lexy.
Yes, the latest of Movies That Matter are covering She Said. Directed by Maria Schrader, She Said, based on the book by Megan Twohey and played by Carey Mulligan, and Jodie Cantor, played by Zoe Kazan, follows the true story of the New York Times article that exposed Harvey Weinstein for the harasser and rapist that he is. All right.
I just have one question for you guys.
Yes.
Oh.
Did you talk to Gwyneth?
Oh.
Did you talk to Gwyneth? Just tell me if you talked to Gwyneth.
Oh, that was so funny.
Yeah. Actually, though, it's funny that you bring that up as the first thing, because that's actually one of my notes. Did either of you read the book?
I did.
Did you feel like Gwyneth got a little bit short shrift in the movie? In terms of, like, how much she contributed to their overall reporting?
Well, how was she portrayed in the book?
She did a lot she was the first person to give them, like, a ton of names and a ton of contacts.
Okay.
Yeah, it's definitely been, I think I read the book pretty soon after it came out, which was probably in 2019, maybe early 2020. Mm-hmm. So it's been a while, and I did have to look up some things after the movie, but I didn't read the whole book again. But I do remember her part being, much more large in the book compared to in the movie, because you barely see her, and you see also, like, the back half of her face. You don't even see a full conversation that they have with her.
Yeah, absolutely.
I kept wondering, like, what did Gwyneth know? What did she know?
She had receipts, man. She really did contribute a lot to the reporting in terms of just being, like, kind of their first big break in the story of getting them to some people to talk to.
And I think especially also there was something about, like, her relationship with Harvey Weinstein that obviously had been soured by his sexual assault and whatnot, but I think, like, I remember reading something that I think he viewed her as kind of his, like, star child. Oh, okay. And so I think he was really, like, fond of her in, like, a special way. And then that's maybe partially why he, like, hyperfixated on her.
Sure.
With wondering if she had talked.
Yeah. He would have felt even more betrayed by her talking than the others.
Yes. Well, she did get him his Oscar, right?
Sure.
For
Shakespeare in Love.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Can I say, like, this movie should get an award for the best used celebrity impersonations?
Yeah.
So, like, the Harvey Weinstein casting was phenomenal.
A lot of it was real, right? Which I thought, so as good a place as any to start. Yeah, I thought, I was like, this was an interesting, and to me, novel way to have done it in a movie when you're dealing with real people. Like, it was kind of fun that was really Ashley Judd.
Yeah, she playing her, like, herself.
It was the reveal, right?
Yeah,
like, it's really her.
Yeah, that was really cool. It sure as heck sounded like Rose McGowan, whoever that was.
Yes.
I didn't check.
It was not her.
It was not her. Yeah. And this sort of, back of his head, but his real voice. And
then even former
was it his real
Trump,
voice,
right?
or was it also the guy who played him?
It depends. Like, they replayed that famous recording of him in the...
That's right, yeah, because I knew some of the recordings
hotel
were real,
hall,
but...
Yeah.
But him on the phone with them.
Yeah, that I thought was the actor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was, very well done.
But it was seamless, yeah.
And I even went back to... So part of how I first heard about the book was that I listened to, like, the episode of The Daily where Megan Twohey and Jodie Cantor are, like, going to talk to Michael Barbaro about some of the reporting and stuff that they did. And I thought it was interesting how Carey Mulligan, compared to especially other roles I've seen of her, she, like, specifically, I think, lowered her voice because it sounds more like Megan Twohey's voice.
Oh, interesting.
I don't think Zoe Kazan sounded as much like Jodie Cantor. I mean, she did a good job, but I think Carey Mulligan, I guess it seemed like there was more intentionality with Carey Mulligan impersonating Megan Twohey than the other way.
Well, I mean, she was also already putting on an accent, so maybe. That just made it easier to, like, adopt a whole new voice. I thought both of them were excellent. And
I did feel like the dialogue felt very stilted towards the beginning. Like, it felt sort of formally recited.
I would agree
first.
with that. I think
it seemed to relax over the film, but yeah, in the beginning I was a little, like, it was distracting.
I felt like the whole, like, opening sequence, the, like, sort of flashback to, was it Zelda Perkins as a young woman in Ireland, and then cross-cutting with, like, the New York stuff. I felt like the whole opening sequence was honestly terrible, and I was like, this does not... I was sitting there like, oh gosh, I hope this ends up being a good movie. And then it sort of, like, flat, like, evened out into, like, a pretty straight, to be honest, conventional procedural. But I didn't have a problem with that. I think that was, like, what the movie needed to be. Like, trying to jazz it up in certain ways, I thought was kind of a fail. Like, just tell the story.
Like, which ways? Because some I liked. I'm wondering if it's the same ones you disliked.
Again.
Yeah, because I liked the, specifically, with... Or who did it end up being? It was Laura Madden, I think, in Ireland. I like that opening sequence of how, like, it starts off with her being, like, excited by all the film crew on the shore, and, there's obviously, like, the love of film at the beginning, and then they get struck down by these incidents with Harvey where that, like, ruins their lives, and then she's like running through, I think, London or something.
Yeah, you're right. It was Laura Madden. That's all.
And I like that, but I didn't.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I agree with you in the sense that I couldn't quite point it out or figure out why, but at least maybe it's because they didn't know each other, but the interactions between Jodie and Megan felt a little weird in the beginning, especially, like, I enjoyed that they included stuff like, and this gets more to, like, the second half of the podcast, but I enjoyed that they included the stuff about, like, postpartum depression and stuff like that.
I wanted to talk about that.
But the dialogue felt a little awkward, or, like, those scenes did feel a little awkward to me, and I wasn't sure why or if that was, like, warranted. But
yeah, I couldn't tell if it was intentional because it, like I said, like, as the film went on, it became more natural, or maybe I got used to it. Yeah.
I agree that it became more natural, and yeah, I think part of what this movie did well is that it's a movie really about how hard it is to come forward and how hard it is to, like, find these sources. And I was talking about this with Jake because we saw it together, and we were talking about how, like, they find someone, they talk to them, they don't want to come forward. They find someone, they talk to them, they don't want to come forward. And it's almost a repetitive process where I feel like in a different movie that would be a downfall of the movie of how repetitive it is. But I think it works in this case because that's what real life is, and that's what
journalism
is, and the nature of the crime that they're reporting on. And so I think it does serve that purpose of, like, you feel, like, the tension and the waiting and the emotion of when they finally, like, get it, and it's like it's so rewarding the way that they edited all of it.
Yeah, I mean, and I do think that was one of the things, like, there was so much about this movie that was just deeply and utterly through every fiber of every scene, like a woman's movie. And I really appreciated that, like, they have Jodie Cantor, like, crying.
Yeah.
When Laura's,
which is
like,
true.
Press the button, like, I put my name on it. I'm ready to go out in public. And I think, there was just an element for me where I'm like, these are two women who have, been in the trenches reporting the story for months, and they are professional, and their professionality is never in question. And then they have a genuine human emotion when things cut their way. And I was like, I'm really glad that we got to see a professional woman who is at the top of her game, tear up. And, like, that's okay. Like, that doesn't hurt her credibility or professionality as a woman,
And her colleague, like, embraces her.
Yeah. And I loved that. I thought there were so many little touches, and I want to talk about the pregnancy thing too, like that just having a female director, you're just like, it's like they got it, they just nailed it for me. And I have to say that as brief as some of them were, like, every single woman just absolutely nailed her sort of monologue interview, no matter how long or how short, her scene was.
For sure.
Everyone. And I think that's what saved it from feeling really monotonous, was, like, every performance and every time you heard basically kind of the same story over again. It was fresh, and it was emotional and you felt sucked into like what this woman had gone through
in their own way.
Yeah,
each one was. Is it? I'm gonna misremember her name now. Emily Morton.
Samantha Morton.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Samantha Morton. She just came in, ripped everyone's wigs off. And just strutted in her heels off the runway. I wanted to like audibly applaud for her when her character left the restaurant. I was like, yes, girl.
Yeah.
Oh, she was the one who played.
She played Zelda, the one who was the one to confront him. I did also so on some of the like movie stuff. I did find it. I didn't love the sort of washed out lighting.
Okay.
It was a bit pale, and everybody was in neutrals or whites, and it was just.
Oh, I was wondering about because it was either like really dark, especially in those like restaurant scenes with the accountant guy.
Sure.
And then like the clothing was all very neutral, and I wasn't sure if that was because like of it going along with a somber tone or trying not to distract from the content of what they were talking about, but it was very neutral. I would agree.
I guess I felt like it was. I took it as a statement of like how much like vibrancy had been bled out of
maybe
their lives as a result of
that's definitely possible.
They were. And I don't want to overstate this because I definitely don't want this to be a commentary on survivors. But like just that thinking about that time and what happened to you, it is sort of a removal of so many of maybe the more vibrant parts of your personality. Like you didn't want to stand out anymore. Like it's taken something really important from you.
That makes a lot of sense, Nicole. And I reckon there's also an element of after a trauma like that, you deaden your senses of the universe around you.
Yeah, it's a better way to say it.
Feel things.
Yeah, because you've received attention in such a horrible way that you then don't want attention from anyone.
Right. Right. Your world is duller and flatter, and you want everyone to perceive you as duller and flatter a little bit. And I
didn't even think of that, guys. Yeah. I think
that's why we need all the ladies in movies that matter.
I feel like she did one of those jobs where it did its job without you realizing it was doing its job.
Yes.
Right? Like I was kind of sitting through the film like this is a fine film. This is perfectly adequate, and then it punches you in the stomach in these very precise ways that I didn't realize they had been building until the payoff comes. Like Ashley Judd making the phone call and Jodie Cantor breaking. I broke down crying at the same moment that Jodie Cantor did because they had set that up for me perfectly, right, to feel that tension break. Yeah,
I totally agree with you because I was thinking it was a similar comment that I think you and Justin had made about Till, that, and I think that maybe in different ways, but that this movie wasn't like overly dramatic in like a stupid way. That it was dramatic and tension filled, but it relates to like the professionalism of the reporting and like the journey that you're on with them, but then also makes you emotional.
Yeah, and I felt like, so, obviously it's standing on some pretty big shoulders, right? All the President's Men, as far as I know, being sort of the first of its kind, so. And then obviously Spotlight and The Post. And I know there was some commentary, like some people found it boring, and you're like, yes, it didn't have Deep Throat in it or whatnot. But, I chose to read the book, and I'm like, I love investigative reporting, and just watching the sausage get made is interesting enough for me. Like,
the book's fantastic. So.
Yeah, exactly. And I think I've recommended it on a previous podcast because I'm just sort of like, it's kind of fun. Like, I just find how they put the stories together, the amount of work that goes into it, how they approach it when they show up at people's stories, like all the little, again, the nuts and bolts, I just find interesting regardless.
Yeah. So the one thing I wish I'd seen more of, I thought a lot of things were done well. Like there are a lot of accounts of Harvey's attacks that are the narration, the monologue is overlaid over an empty room, the room being the setting where the attack happened. And that empty room feels like much more menacing than if they had just tried to reenact the scene.
Mm-hmm.
Right? More like the overlay visuals and the recordings and stuff.
Right. So we're hearing the person recount what happened to her while we're looking at the empty hotel room or hallway or whatever, hotel hallway. I liked that. That said, I do kind of wish that we had seen more of what Weinstein did to put the kibosh on all the previous attempts of news coverage. They mention it a couple of times.
They silenced all the previous stories.
Right. They said he always kills it, and then he never actually makes a concerted attempt. That would have added a bit more drama for me, and just for the stakes of like, why hadn't this story been told in the 30 years previous?
Right.
And I kept waiting for the sort of the other shoe to drop for them, and their editors were all perfectly supportive and backed them up. And I was like, why didn't anyone write this story before? Apparently they just needed a really supportive boss.
I guess most of it was like them taking a long time to comment and like threatening lawyer action, but that was most
felt
of
very weak to me.
And or writing hit pieces, right? So they would trail people, and they would try to steer.
That's true. They have like the stock.
And they don't tell them about like planning stories in Variety and Hollywood to spike their guns. I felt like that was covered, and I think, I guess to me, I mean, the simple fact is the reason that that the story hadn't been written before was because the sheer amount of effort that went into writing the story was expensive, right? They had to fly all over the country, and like it was months and months and months of them working on one story. Mm-hmm. And number one, and number two, just that sheer difficulty of finding anyone to go on the record. So I think, yes, there was a lot of things he did behind the scene, but I think the story was just a difficult one to tell. And you also, and I did appreciate the sort of setup of Megan Twohey having just written an article about Trump's sexual abuse, having it change nothing, him still get elected, and that playing into like why these stories don't get told, because who's going to do all this work and have nothing happen, right?
And the survivor having her life ruined, essentially.
Right. Well, and I mean,
and her doubting her message about it making anything, like you said, making anything better. I agree, that was a good setup to the beginning of
I thought that part was very effective, because it really, from the very beginning, they're like, this is why this will be hard.
And it takes you back to that time, like, we were all cognizant during that time. And so I think it also really, like, brings you back to that moment and thinking about, like,
that was rough.
What it was like. And, I mean, in ways we're still like that with all the after effects from that time as well.
Yeah. So to the sort of washed out feeling of the movie, the other thing that I really just was disappointed in was I found the soundtrack like the most sort of banal, like an AI wrote a movie soundtrack. Like I was like, this is so nondescript. Like I just was like, you could have given it a little something. Like I really hated the soundtrack, the music.
Oh Lord, I didn't even notice it.
Yeah, that's how it was.
I didn't notice it either.
Yeah, it was spectacularally unmemorable.
Like AI wrote it.
Yeah.
If you squint your eyes, it makes sense, but if you focus, it really doesn't.
Yeah, it was just one of those like So I definitely was not a fan of that.
The one other thing I had with the movie is I was watching a couple interviews after, and relating to like we mentioned earlier that some of these people, specifically Harvey, you never see their face, you only see like the back of their heads. And Jodie was saying that was a cognizant decision to not show his face and the focus on like female narration because it's a woman's story to tell and it being like a woman's movie. So I thought that was interesting to hear. And that like, there are obviously men involved, like the editor that Andre Brower plays, but that it's women telling this other women's story about an issue that is heavily against women.
Right. And actually, so the part of the beginning section that I did like once we got through the Ireland stuff or whatever, back to New York City, there's just shot after shot after shot of just female extras, right?
Yes.
Like, just women only. Women on the street, women living their life in New York, and it was just... Yeah, it really did its absolute best not to center any kind of man in the story except where necessary.
Mm-hmm.
And I loved, I thought the ending, going back and showing each of the women as young women, as survivors, you know, like you have... like Rowena Chow, like looking out the window, like it's all over. I'm dealing with it. Like it's a new day. And I thought that was I thought it was such a critical and important way to end the movie about sexual abuse, where, you know, you really are moving away from using the word victims to like using the word survivor, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like this,
and
is
then
something...
the names at the end I thought was amazing as well.
The names
over the credits.
Oh,
yeah, it was kind of intermixed with, it was like she said, and then a lot of the names were like intermixed together in red text.
Yeah.
Okay.
I think it's probably easy to miss depending on like how it's overlaid. I think she said is like the biggest letters that you can make out, but their names are intermixed as well.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay.
I really loved that.
Shall we talk about the women's problems, right? Like the characters all each had sort of problems that were specific to females, I should say. Postpartum depression, breast cancer. There were all these other things that were affecting them in addition to having to deal with sexual assault. It almost seemed to be like, we have problems. You know, we have things that males don't have to worry about.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't take it that way. And I really love the addition of the like postpartum conversation because I thought it was striking a chord of the overall message of the movie is that these are things that women talk about amongst themselves. These are conversations they don't have when men are present. And those are the, you know, to our detriment at some point. And I think it's sort of the message of the movie is like, or in the book and the reporting is like, we actually would all be a lot safer if we told all the dudes we work with who the creepy guy in the office was. Which we don't tend to do, right? Because we're afraid of the blowback or whatever the reason, or it's instinct at this point not to do it. But I'm like, you know, if you're in a situation where it's like, Nicole, just like, don't leave yet because blah, blah, blah is going to stop by my office. Like, you could be like, Dave, don't leave yet because blah, blah, blah is going to stop. Like, give men a chance to like participate in all of this. And also, I mean, the whole point of Me Too was like, you need to hear these stories. You need to know what this is like for us. And
realize how many people it's affected.
Right. And I thought that like, yeah, the postpartum discussion was very much a like, well, these are things that you don't know about until you talk to another woman.
Yeah. I also thought the scene with the daughter and Jodie video chatting, where I think she might be in London. Mm-hmm. And yeah, she's just having like a nighttime catch up with her daughter, and her daughter says something like what's rape? And she's like, why have you heard that word? And, you know, she says that the boys like throw it around school that often, and it's like, oh yeah, like starts like that messaging can start really early. And also that video, to your point, that video chat was just, I mean, it's by nature of the fact that she was in London and she was not with her husband, but it also follows that like it's just her and her daughter, two women talking to each other. There's no men in that scene as well.
Right. And like partially because this literally just happened to me a few months ago. I think my absolute favorite moment of the entire movie is when they walk out, they meet each other. I think were they going to Gwyneth Paltrow's house and they're wearing like the same outfit.
Oh yeah.
And I was like, I literally just had that happen to me, and I was
Should
like,
we change?
I was like, everything about that was like fantastic about how like sort of the women you're close to, and as you start to spend more time with each other, you know, you sort of pick up. Yeah. I just love that.
You start to meld.
I was like, that is just such a woman's moment. Like, just like a women thing to pay attention to, because like if two guys were wearing a suit, they wouldn't think.
They wouldn't notice.
Yeah. And
we're wearing the same color tie. Should I change my? They wouldn't think of it. And to them, it was automatic. Like, and we saw it too. We're like, oh damn.
Yeah.
They both wore white.
Yeah. But they were both like, oh, it's like a summer day and at like a picnic party, I'm going to wear like a sundress. You know what I mean? Like, just like everything about that was like pitch perfect. And to me, again, like that's just such a very, very female moment. And like only a woman would think to like write or include that scene.
Sure. And I think that scene and the postpartum scene, ironically enough, might be the only scenes that make this film pass the Bechdel test.
Oh, because all the rest of them are talking about Harvey
right.
and like the men. Yeah.
Right.
That's funny. I like very intentionally went to see this movie with 3 other women my own age, but in like different industries and, you know, like different careers and stuff, to talk about some of the themes. And I think, you know, like I think one of the things that, how much did this actually change? Like, how do we feel about where we are now with Me Too?
Yeah, I think things have definitely shifted. That they're not where they were before.
Okay.
In some ways, good, and in some ways, not as good.
Okay.
I think, you know, especially if you have like a diversity training at your work, I think, you know, they've tried to include more, at least from what I've seen, they've tried to include more about what's okay and what's not okay. But I know people have written about, since the Me Too movement, is now men are like afraid to be around women in kind of some way. It backfired in that because now certain things are not okay, they almost don't want to be around women, which then prevents women from moving up or being in the room because they just don't even want to worry about it. I went to my dentist. My typical dentist is a woman, but I think she was out that day. And so when the dentist came in, it was a guy, and I had seen him before. And I think he was about to like tap me on the shoulder or something like that. But then before he did it, he was like, you know, are you okay with like, is this okay with me doing this? Like some people, like, I've been told apparently it's like not okay anymore. And it kind of, and again, this is just like a shoulder tap. This is nothing like extraordinary. Like, this is not, on the scheme of things, it's not a huge thing, but it just, the way that he talked about it had this air of like, this just seems so silly. Like, this was okay to do before, and now like I have to question it.
Oh no, it was 100%. I have feelings. Now you need to manage them for me as the woman in the room, right?
Yeah.
Like, I have a thing. Please, you fix it.
Well, it was
it's
also
your problem now.
It was so funny. Like,
you're the lady.
I think I told him, I was like, you know, I don't care, but other people, you know, they might feel differently about it. So I think it's just important to ask if that's what if someone's okay with it. And then the dentist, I don't know if it's like the tech or whatever, but
like the hygienist person.
Yeah, the person who does most of the work.
Right.
And then the dentist comes in at the last minute.
Yeah, talk about a 5-second cameo.
I know, yeah. Yeah, I love her. She's great. But she chimes in and she's like, that's a no. And he's like, okay. But yeah, it was just sort of like, and again, it was just interesting to hear how he like talked about it in that, yeah, like you said, it's like, I have feelings. I'm like kind of mad that I have to like think about these things now that are about other people's feelings, and like, you know, let me grill you on it and make you feel like you have to say it's okay.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah. That is like a very like perfect encapsulation of like everything post-meet. I was like, well, we're gonna end the podcast now. Based on Lexi's one story. But yeah, and I had a friend who hadn't gotten this message from me. I thought I had put this out across the board to everyone I know, which is, do not send me any link to any article about the problem with discrimination in academic economics. I will not be reading any of these articles anymore. Tons of them have been published. They get regularly published all the time. Absolutely nothing has changed in academic economics And I don't need to read an article about it. It's like, I know there's a problem. I experienced that there was a problem. There's definitely a problem. All the research supports there are a problem. You're writing this article to try to make somebody to do something, and it's not going to work, and I don't need to read this.
Because, I'm not the audience you need to be preaching to.
Well, and it's like, it doesn't work. I get why people feel like they need to keep rewriting these articles because absolutely nothing's changed. But, I'm like, nothing's going to change, so stop, I'm glad they're out there. I personally do not need to read yet another one of these. There's nothing new.
Sure.
So, I almost and Louis C.K.'s back. I was like, does anybody stay canceled? For all the male fear of being canceled.
Yeah. No, and even Chris Brown, beat Rihanna over a decade ago. And is now, back and having, I don't know about chart toppers, but I think, his music is definitely being listened to by not just a minute number of people. And it's we know what he did to Rihanna.
Yeah.
We've known this for years, but he's back. And, yeah, it's people think it's this death sentence, but is it really? And then, he sent us an article about empathy. That, empathy towards men in these situations that they've suffered enough, and so there's this fear that doesn't always really even pan out.
Right. Well, and I think too, not that this wasn't an incredibly important thing to do, and we absolutely needed to get this rapist behind bars. The refrain that you kept hearing from any man accused of anything was, "But I'm not Harvey Weinstein." Right?
Oh, yeah.
I'm
not that bad.
Yeah.
What a low bar.
So I was like, well, I'm not Harvey Weinstein. And I was like,
I guess you're free to go.
Yeah. It's but I'm not Charles Manson. I'm like, but you did kill your wife. I don't want
Yeah, fair.
I was feeling quite cynical about the whole thing, and then as our conversation or our post movie conversation started to meander, some of the things that got pointed out to me by my friends was that there have been some interesting law changes across the states about number one, in a lot of states, including DC, you can no longer ask somebody their previous salary.
Damn straight.
And number two, a lot of states are pushing for transparency where you have to post a salary range.
Yeah, in New York.
In New York, Colorado, a couple others. And so those are two pretty awesome changes. And you're okay, they're not nationwide, but still, I'm they were
it's something.
It's something.
Yeah.
And I was like, you're right. That is that's a change that was made post
That's
Me Too.
True. That's true. I do think there's a bit of a power shift in the sense that, yes, it's annoying when men kind of complain about being scared, that they might get called out for doing something they did.
Oh, also that they can't randomly hit on whoever they want at work.
Sure. Sure.
Their life is so terrible. They're now I can't even ask somebody out. And you're
that is a cross to bear. So
yeah.
Thoughts and prayers. But the flip side of that is that they think twice now.
Yeah. They're aware.
Right. They're aware of there could be consequences to, I think there was a rule of thumb. I'm not taking credit for this. Someone else wrote this. You'll have to Google it. But she basically said, if you're not sure, sir, if you can say or do something to someone at work, imagine that person is Dwayne The Rock Johnson. If you wouldn't do it to Dwayne The Rock Johnson, it's like you said, it's a no.
That's hilarious.
Don't do it. Very easy, very simple. But yeah, I do feel like I can walk a little taller now, knowing that if I so much as shoot someone a glance, that's the evil dagger eyes. What did you just say? What did you just do? They will shrink and back away because they know there will be consequences.
Yeah, I feel like maybe the reporting has gotten better. I hope that it's taken more seriously and isn't just a knee-jerk
hopefully
slut shame or boys will be boys type attitude. I can't say that I've experienced that personally. I mean, I don't feel like enough has changed.
There's certainly still, and I think the article on empathy touches on this. Maybe you'll link to it in the show notes. Yeah. What's even deeper, and Samantha Morton's character touches on this. She said this is about the system protecting abusers. So yeah, the abusers are a problem, right? What's the larger problem is, and they mentioned the NDAs a lot. Like this movie was like out for NDAs.
For sure. No, that's a good point.
The problem is that the system protects abusers. And in one aspect of that is that and this is true around the globe. This isn't just the US, this isn't just this time. If you do something, you will not be punished nearly so profoundly as the person who says out loud what you did.
Right.
And I think that's what's so corrupt about rape culture in general.
Yeah, no, and that's great. And I'm glad you brought up the NDAs. Important point. Like, some of those laws have changed as well. Like, you can no longer force someone to sign an NDA based on certain, like crimes that were committed, basically. And just the awareness of how much a system of NDAs was protecting a lot of people.
Yeah, I think that was part of the storyline in the book with Gloria Allred and Lisa Bloom, is that they were like touted as, these feminist lawyers and helping all these cases. And, I haven't studied their full caseload, so maybe there are some real winners in there, but that they were also part of that system and kind of, being a trusted source and pushing people towards these NDAs or system or like options that we're not going to have like the full payout as maybe something else would have.
Yeah, and I don't know that I can necessarily read the barometer on this, but like the more it gets said and shown and talked about in terms of like why women don't report is something men can get told too many times, right?
Right.
That like it's very hard to do this. You are not believed when it happens. You often face incredibly damaging consequences for speaking out. Like
yeah. Well, also I think actually to a point of about change, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure also in some areas the length of time that you have to report something after it happened, I think has been lengthened in some cases in some areas because, people may not report it immediately and they wait 10 years or 15 years or 5 years. And I think in terms of change, I think that has been lengthened in some areas as a positive change.
Sure. The statute of limitations.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. So I was listening to this really good podcast by the woman who first basically measured the statistic of 1 in 4 women on college campuses have been sexually assaulted, and what a groundbreaking that story was, I think in the 80s. And she's like, and the thing is, that number hasn't budged. It hasn't. And what was so groundbreaking about that study and how it came out so high and everybody just didn't see it coming was that they didn't ask any woman if she had been raped, because the answer was always no. They started asking things like, have you had sex when you really didn't want to? Right? So they started to point to all the behaviors that I and other women have been in situations where you're consent's on a somewhat of a spectrum in your head.
Yeah.
But where you're a lot of us, are looking back and you tell your story to a friend and you're and your friend's wait, you were raped? And you're did I tell this story wrong? And your friend's no, you didn't. No, you did not tell this story wrong. And it's there's just, even in women's own minds, you don't want to admit that that's kind of what happened, and how groundbreaking it was for her to say, okay, we're not going to use any of the words. We're just going to talk about the scenarios and the behaviors.
Yeah. And
then suddenly we realize what a huge problem with sexual assault we have, because to report something, you have to realize that something wrong actually happened even. And just getting over that hurdle
Yeah. And that's one thing, so my job, you know, we work with surveys, and one of the things that you test for in like cognitive testing between is, calling something by a name versus describing what it is.
Right.
And even between those two scenarios, like we found, is like you can get totally different results just based on that language. So it's incredibly important. And then I think kind of what you were saying, like there's so much nuance in how consent can be and what people might do even if they're uncomfortable. I remember like also kind of post, like right after a lot of this was breaking, there was like the story with Aziz Ansari.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a while since I've looked into it, and people feel a lot of different ways about that particular story. But one thing I do remember very much thinking when it came out was, like, it does bring up that there's a lot of nuance in how people are coerced and how something that may seem consensual on the surface is not really consensual, and how important it is, especially to like check in with your partner before, during, and after, not just one and done.
I think another point that was made in this movie, as like, you know, we were out after the movie, and it was on my rant about how like feminists keep getting blamed for like not being popular enough, and I'm like,
sure.
I was like, you're right, we haven't convinced anybody anything. Like, I need the men to come along with me, you know, like we're not doing a good job. Totally agree. We're failing. Like Roe v. Wade's been overturned. Like we're losing. I agree with you. It's not my fault though. But
how do we make this more fun?
Yeah, like how do we make this more appealing?
I mean, it's more sexy.
Yeah, it's like, how do we make the patriarchy and having all the power and control less appealing to men?
I got nothing. I got nothing.
An app? I don't know. But like so then one of the women was like, I mean, yeah, like, how many dudes were in this theater watching this movie? and we were kind of like, it was like not that many.
I don't know.
Did you see in your?
It was really small. The theater I was in, it was me, my husband, and a male friend of mine, and then it was like,
hey, you brought an extra dude. Cheers.
And then it was, I think, 2 seemingly hetero couples. Yeah. So it was actually kind of equal. But again, it was really small. There were maybe, 3 distinct groups of us. Okay. With 2 to 3 people in each. So not a huge theater.
That sounds similar to the theater I was in. A few hetero-looking couples and me. And me. I wonder, this is a great question. I wonder how effective this will be. I know this is built into our format, but I do wonder how, like, does this kind of thing get through to anyone but the choir? Is it just the choir that goes to see it?
Yeah, because who's buying a ticket? You know, is the choir buying a ticket, or is a bunch of people buying the ticket?
Or is the choir bringing their friend?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
I mean, I do think part of it, and the most frustrating part of it, is that, like, we are all unfortunately playing the long game, right? This doesn't work because there was one article written about Harvey Weinstein, right? It's all the men that came down. It's all the times we've said it. It's all the stories. It's all the Me Too. Like, it's just repeated, and then we watch the sort of culture start to shift, right?
Yeah,
sure. You made me think of something.
Yeah.
The line that you see in the trailer as well as stands out in the movie is, none of these women will jump unless they all jump together.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There was something about everyone using the Me Too hashtag that exact same week. It was all the women jumping together.
Very true.
And we're seeing this in Iran as well. Right? Their regime is in trouble because all the women jumped together. And everyone
it's like critical mass.
Went with, that's right.
It's critical mass, but I think too, like, I think what was so pivotal about Me Too and where the work doesn't need, I mean, internalized misogyny is a thing, fine. Definitely.
Sure.
Take that as a given. But, like, again, we need the men to start paying attention with this. Like, we cannot win this on our own. And I think what was so great about Me Too was it was just like, look, every woman you know has this story.
Yeah, your daughters, your wives, your mothers, whatever.
Yeah, it wasn't just an echo chamber. The point was to say, to show men, this is the stuff that we deal with. Mm-hmm. And I think, again, I've been guilty of sort of being in the whisper network that only women knew about. And I've been trying to be more aware of including men in the conversation. And I think I told you this story that, like, a friend of mine was, like, at work. She has a female boss, and her female boss thought she looked nice and said to a male coworker, like, said to her in front of a male coworker, like, oh, you know, my friend's name, like, looks really nice today. And she was like, stand up and show him your dress.
What?
Oh.
And the male coworker was like, that is not appropriate.
Snaps.
And I was like, so then I was like, there's hope for us after all. You know, like, I was like, he was just immediately like, not okay. And I was like,
that's good. That's good.
Super cool.
A lot of men, I would say, I guess there's no way to know, but a whole lot of men want to be good men.
I agree.
You know, they want to do well by us. They really, really do.
Yeah, it's just getting clear about what that looks like.
Yes, for sure.
It has to be at no cost to them. That's where the problem becomes. That cost that guy nothing.
Sure.
But then if you tell that guy your, like, best friend at work, who you're really close to, is a serial harasser and he needs to get fired, then suddenly there's a cost to him and what becomes with his behavior. I think that's the issue. But I think you're right. We need to get at least the low-hanging fruit.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah, and that was brought up very well in Promising Young Woman, which we didn't get to review.
Yes.
But that, like, Bo Burnham, the guy, at the end was complicit, but we thought he was such a good guy.
I didn't.
Oh.
Most chilling moment for me, and this is like a high bar for this film, right? When Megan Twohey kind of sarcastically asks Weinstein's lawyer, well, she initially sincerely asks, how many lawsuits would you say? And she reveals out of him that there have been 8 to 12 lawsuits. And she sarcastically asks, do you feel like that's a normal number? And he sincerely answers, yeah. And the look on her face when she realizes he's serious, that he genuinely thinks that's a normal number and that it might be.
It's like a year, right? I think 8 to 10 to 12 a year or something.
Right. It's a lot. It's a lot. And she's just like the blood drains from her face when she realizes that he might accurately be saying that 8 to 12 lawsuits is a normal amount for an executive at a company.
Yeah, well, this didn't happen in the movie, but I was wondering if it would. There's that scene, and then later there's the scene where she's talking to someone else. I forget who, over the phone, and I forget what the position is, but it's a guy who works for the Weinstein Company, and she's just trying to validate that number. I think as like doing the due diligence to validate it, and she's like, "Does 8 to 12 number sound about accurate?" And he ends up saying just yes, but I thought he was going to say it was even higher.
Yes, I think we all did. And I actually love when she confronts the first guy in his home and his wife is there.
Yes. That was a great scene.
And the look.
What lawsuits, honey?
Yeah.
I mean, just the look, again, like, they were just this ensemble cast, just, you know how much I want, like, an ensemble cast Oscar. Like,
sure, the Golden Globes are coming. Yeah.
I just, like, every little short, brief cameo performance like that was just...
That actress had one line. And it was... Oh, it just bowled you over.
It did. Yeah. And you're like, it's like, I've been a week since I've seen the movie, and I was like, I just still remember and his look on his face, like, all credit to the male actor as well, like, that whole scene, you're like...
Mm-hmm. Brutal.
Absolutely devastating.
Yeah. Another one I was thinking of that also gave me chills, or not chills, but kind of powerful scene was, and we kind of been the financial guy that eventually gives them the memo.
Yeah.
Their deep throat, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think he says something like, "Oh, I just thought it was something lower level
Right.
than it was." I forget what the exact words are.
Yeah.
And he's like, "Oh, I didn't realize." And then he leaves his phone on the table and gets up and goes to the bathroom and he's like slides it.
Yeah. But again, the look on his face when he's like, what have I done?
Yeah. He's been working to protect this guy for a living.
And
this guy is also supposed to hate Harvey.
He does.
And he's still complicit.
Yeah.
I did want to look up the box office.
Oh yeah.
To your point about like who saw this movie.
I feel like
my
box
guess
office
is
means effing nothing to me.
That is true.
So like 9 million worldwide.
Yeah. So the starting date I have on here is...
I mean, it wasn't going to be very expensive.
I mean, it cost more than that. That is a financial failure.
Oh.
In a single digit? For global?
Unless it's like super indie, then that can be fine.
No, you're right. A single digit is really bad. I don't know what I was thinking.
You know my take on this, actually? It was always going to have a hard time because it's not a fun topic, right? That it's not fun for the whole family. But I do think films like this, it's going to be harder and harder to get box office in general if it's something you could just as easily watch on streaming.
All right, so I'll be the one to start. This is a tough one. I guess I mean it hasn't done very well box office wise. It is a story we actually like. The impact of this movie was the original story itself, but for all the great performances, for any money that gets thrown at such a female centric picture, I mean, I guess like you could say like it could have a negative impact because is it setting back because we didn't have enough box office? But I'm solidly gonna give it. I would give it a 5, but I really, really enjoyed it, and the performances were so spectacular. I'm going to up it to a 6.
Okay.
It got to be over the average because it was a good movie.
Oh, I can go next. Yeah, I'm gonna go a little higher to give it a 7, also because I really enjoyed it and I thought it was really well done. And I think there is hope. Hopefully, maybe there will be a resurgence at award season, depending on what categories it falls into and how many nominations it gets. So there could maybe...
Yep.
It's a hopeful 7.
Yeah, I'm thinking the same thing, that someone could get nominated and give it a little boost. How about you, Stacy?
I think I'm more in line with a comment you made just now about it being about something that had an impact score of 10, possibly. It's recounting something that had impact. It's like everything in it. The impact already happened.
Okay.
It's not particularly new cinematically. I liked it better when it was called Spotlight. So I'm thinking more a 3.
Okay.
But that is no knock at all to the performances in the film that were all phenomenal. I did, shout out to all those actors and actresses.
Excellent. All right. Tell us something we should see, hear, buy.
I mean, the book is a given.
I'm going to give almost the opposite of a recommendation. If you can go hate watch the original film MASH.
Interesting.
Have you ever seen this movie?
No, actually.
It's a movie about, it's basically She Said, but if Harvey Weinstein was the good guy protagonist.
Oh, dear.
It's from his point of view and how this lame, stuck-up woman is constantly being a jerk and ruining his fun, and he just gives it to her. And the audience is just super glad that, that she just flames out at the end because she was a killjoy. And it's this movie, MASH, the one that the beloved television series is based on, the film, starring Donald Sutherland, whom otherwise I love. This movie is trash and deserves to burn, and I don't feel that way about a lot of movies.
Wow. All right.
Funny.
So if you should watch it just to understand what the mentality used to be.
I'm recommending a buy. This is a movie about professional ladies. I'm having a professional lady recommendation. These are the No Nonsense Yoga Waistband tights. These are the most these are like tights that are as comfortable as leggings.
I'm going to recommend another movie podcast that I've been listening to more recently called Guilty Pleasures. It's an offshoot of, if you watch YouTube and you know the Try Guys, Zach from the Try Guys has a podcast with Kelsey and Garrick. And they talk about movies, typically more of like the silly kind. Like the last episode that I just listened to was they did the new Lindsay Lohan movie, Falling for Christmas, on Netflix. And so they cover those kind of movies, and they talk about the pleasures and the guilty parts of the film, and, you know, review it, and, you know, either tell fun stories along with it and whatnot. So it's a good time. It's a good, casual, fun podcast to listen to, and I've enjoyed it.
Excellent. Well, thank you for listening. We hope you enjoyed this episode. Find us on Facebook. You can email us at moviesmatterpod@gmail.com. Our website is moviesthatmatterpodcast.com. Guess what? We're not on Twitter.
Take that, Elon Musk.
Yeah, I was like, I mean, we kind of weren't in the first place, and we sure as heck aren't now.
Now it's on principle.
So we hope you enjoyed this episode, and remember, movies matter.
And so do you.
We'll see you next time.